I'm going to Texas.
We're live. Oh, really?
My daughter won a free.
Good evening. Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting for March 13th, 2023. And we will open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Rolson, would you take a roll call of council present?
Mr. Davish,
Here.
Mr. Drake,
Here.
Mr. Horniak,
Here.
Mrs. Paula, Mr. Reeves,
Here.
Mr. Wallensack,
Here.
Mr. Zale.
Here. Also present at tonight's meeting are Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, Commissioner of Rec Tim Borton, and Finance Director Nick Roman. Council, Ms. Pollock could not be here this evening. She is on vacation. Can I get a motion to excuse her from tonight's meeting?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish.
Go ahead.
Council, any
Drake.
objections? With no objections, Ms. Pollock is excused from tonight's meeting. Next order of business, council, is the approval of the meeting minutes from our regular meeting on February 27th, 2023.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move to accept the minutes as presented from the February 27, 2023 regular council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? Hearing none, the meeting minutes from February 27th regular meeting are approved. Council, since we did not have a committee of the whole meeting last week, we need to add items number 38 through 43, 2023. Can I get a motion to add these items?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, items 38 through 43, 2023 will be on tonight's agenda. And the first item up for discussion is item 38, 2023, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and I will defer to Chief Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. President, Council. What this does is gives us the opportunity to do all of our testing for all of our ground ladders, all hoses, and our nozzles for all of our equipment within the City of Oregon's Fire Department. If you look at this, you'll see that there's two bids, one through FireCat and one through National Hose Testing. However, FireCat gave us a three-year deal, saving us thousands of dollars versus going through National Hose Testing, which also does not do multi-year contracts, nor do they do any nozzle testing. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Chief. Council, are there any questions or comments for Chief Mullins? Hearing none, I will assign item 38, 2023 as ordinance 38, 2023, and ask Ms. Rolson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into a 3-year agreement with FireCat Precision Service Testing, 3250 West Big Beaver Road, Suite 544, Troy, Michigan, for the annual testing of equipment in the fire department as an annual cost of $8,360 for the period of March 15, 2023 through March 14, 2026, and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 38 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallensack. Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Ms. Rolson, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack,
Yes.
Mr. Davish,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Zale.
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 38, 2023 passes with 6 yeas and 0 nays. The next item for discussion is item 39, 2023, which is also presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins. And once again, I will defer to Chief Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, once again, this completes the order of defibrillators for the rest of the city. We originally did this order last year for the entire fire department. And what this order will do is complete this for the police department and the rest of the works within the city, rec department, wastewater, everybody else in the entire city. So this just completes it, makes it compatible with the current LifePak 15s that we carry for cardiac monitoring and doing the 12 leads.
Thank you, Chief. The ones we purchased last year, you just said, these are going to mirror those. Was that an upgrade in technology last year when we did that?
It was also an upgrade in technology because we were using the Philips AEDs, and every time we had a cardiac arrest, we would have to tear those pads off that were on the chest and put another set of pads on just to use that, those pads for a cardiac arrest.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 39, 2023 as ordinance 39, 2023, and ask Ms. Rolson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to purchase 16 LifePak CR2 defibrillators, semi-automatic USB English with handle, 8-year warranty and accessories from Stryker Sales Corporation, 1901 Romance Road, Parkway, Portage, Michigan, in the amount of $30,411.28 to be used in the Oregon Fire Division and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 39 of 2023 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenzak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak. Ms. Rolson, will you take a roll call vote of council, please? Davish.
All right. Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 39, 2023 passes with 6 yeas and 0 nays. The next item for consideration this evening is item 40, 2023, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Law Director Melissa Pepora. And I will defer to Ms. Pepora.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is to enter into a participation agreement with the opioid distributors of Tevia, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. As council may recall, in 2021, we also entered into 2 participation agreements with Cardinal Health, AmerisourceBergen, Bergen, McKesson, Johnson & Johnson, and Janssen. So this is very similar. It's through the state of Ohio that we have the one Ohio opioid settlement. Through this participation agreement with Tevia, Allergan, CVS, and Walgreens, the national settlement for these distributors is approximately $250 billion. The actual amount that is coming to the state of Ohio and the political subdivisions is unknown at this time. The Attorney General's office is recommending that the political subdivisions enter into this. The deadline to opt in is April 18th, 2023. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Council, any questions or comments on this?
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak.
Yes, Ms. Purpura, if you could, how does this relate to the previous settlement that we accepted? And does this also fall to that, I'll call it advisory council for lack of a better term, and how the funds are distributed and how they're utilized throughout that? How does this relate to that?
It relates to it as it is, it's the same, in line with the same regulations
Okay.
that we entered into with the other 2 ordinances. It's just different distributors. So under the Ohio One opioid settlement with the state of Ohio, it regulates what we can use these funds for. We also have a reporting that we have to report what we've utilized this fund or these funds for. We had to establish a fund, which we did. So it is exactly the same as what the other 2 settlement agreements we entered into.
Okay, so this basically is, for lack of a better term, just additional defendants, if you will, or a separate
Yes.
separate suit settlement with different defendants than what was presented the first time we approved it.
That is correct, Mr. Horn.
Does the disbursement of funds follow the same committee that was established last time?
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing that is unknown is what the state of Ohio will get out of the $250 billion, and then out of what Ohio gets, it's then dispersed if we end up opting in.
Okay.
So that number is unknown at this time, but they should know, they said in the next couple months. But my concern was that we would miss the deadline before we would know what that amount is.
Okay. And the individual that was selected or identified to be the representative within that board, that's the same person that would be representing with this one as well.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Purpura.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Thank you,
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Purpura, the monies that have been dispersed to the city, where have they been spent? How are they being spent? So we get a better idea of kind of where that money goes.
Mr. Wallenczak, Fund 226 is where those funds are currently being held. I just had to file a report. None of the funds have yet been spent. We have to make sure once they are spent, they are in line with the memorandum, but at this time, the city has not spent any of those funds.
And that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Ms. Pora. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 402-2023 as ordinance 40-2023 and ask Ms. Rolson to read it into the record.
Authorizing recommendation to accept the One Ohio opioid settlement and enter into a participation agreement with opioid distributors Teva, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart, and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 40 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Ms. Rolson, would you take a roll call vote of council on ordinance 40?
Mr. Wallenczak,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Davish,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Zale.
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 40-2023 passes with 6 yeas and 0 nays. Next item is item 41-2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Major, and Law Director Melissa Purpura. I guess I'll go to Mr. Major on this.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance would allow for the transfer of land from the city to the OEDF. And Cassie, if you could put the map on the screen so everybody can see exactly where this property is at. Excuse me. It is at the corner of Wynn and Cedar Point Road, the northeast corner. It's approximately 20 acres. And for a historical context, this property was donated to the city in 2004. The historical context from the prior owner is that it was donated to the city in good faith that the city would use the land for further development, whatever that may be. If you notice, if you could zoom into that map too, Ms. Rawson, and note the city actually invested in planting trees around that perimeter of that parcel as a screening. In my opinion, this land should have been transferred to the OEDF some time ago. The city has owned it for however many years for whatever reason. But it's currently the city actually does pay taxes on it at $600 a year. It is farmed right now, but you know, again, this is just a more of a formality to get the property over to the OEDF for some type of development. So Alec is here also for questions. If anybody has questions, please ask.
Thank you, Mr. Major. We had discussed this earlier, and I did discuss this with Alec too. You know, transferring this property to them will take care of this tax issue, which is something maybe we've overlooked, where we really shouldn't have been paying taxes on this. We should have actually been requiring the person that's actually using the property to pay the taxes. And I think Alec had told me earlier that that's in fact what they would do.
Yeah,
And they watchdog that. Correct, Alec?
Yep.
So kind of a thing.
this would relieve us,
Pardon me?
relieve the city of the tax burden.
It
of that
does.
property.
It
Yep.
does. Okay. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none. I will assign item 41-2023 as ordinance 41-2023 and ask Ms. Ralston to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with the Oregon on the Bay Regional Economic Development Foundation to allow the city to transfer land to the Oregon on the Bay Regional Economic Development Foundation to market for future development and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 41 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Mr. Rolson, would you take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 41, 2023 passes with 6 yeas and 0 nays. Next item up is item 42, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. And I will defer to Mr. Roman on item 42.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to purchase water service piping, valves, and appurtenances for the Water Distribution Department. As part of our 2023 CIP project, we want to replace all of our lead service lines that remain in the city. We have about 350 remaining out of 7,000 customers. Out of the 4 bids received, Core & Main LP was the lowest and best bid. And again, purchase was approved in the CIP budget. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments on item 42?
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
if I may, nothing specific to the ordinance, but just a general question. Seeing certain things around the, I'll say, building environment improving. Have we seen improvements as far as our supplies of materials and basically just everything that we're utilizing? Are we starting to see that the supply lines are better at fulfilling demand right now? Are we seeing that that's starting to happen? And are we seeing or hearing about any price pressure where we see that some of the increases over the last couple of years are starting to come back as we see the commodities of steel and aluminum rolling back 8 to 10% over the last 90 days? Are we anticipating anything like that?
Well, we're not really seeing a break in pricing. And the thought is, would a recession come eventually and reduce those costs? But I can tell you delivery is still taking a long time. Just for this ordinance alone, these things will take 6 months to receive. So it's still a long delivery. I'd say the biggest thing in construction is electrical items. Transformers are a really big one. As you recall, our UV project was delayed by almost 17 months waiting for a transformer. Like our Coy Navarre project, the poles always take a long time, but all the electrical boxes, we may not see them till the summer now. So there is major delays in just electrical equipment. We'll still get temporary lights up and like we're doing now and we'll get by, but electrical is probably the biggest item for the country.
So we're still seeing the challenges of
Oh,
supply
yeah.
line.
Oh, yeah.
Still long lead
Well,
times and
and-
inflated costs.
I think we had discussions in previous meetings just about our purchasing limits and so on. This ordinance for this equipment, normally in past years, this would have been below 50 grand, and some years prior to that, there wouldn't have been an ordinance because the dollar amount has been so great. It's just that these dollar amounts are so high. I had to go to public bids for this. Normally we just get quotes. Over 50,000, you have to get formal bids, and that's what we did.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rowe.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mr. Major.
just to add a little context to that, and this will make sure Mark Mullins is on his toes here. But fire equipment is another item, especially vehicles, that's also in short supply. So those are specialty vehicles that need to be made, the chassis and everything. So, I know medic units and engines are, 3 years out?
2 years out for our medic unit that we ordered last year. We won't even receive that till possibly February or March of '24. And then fire trucks right now, if you order a fire truck, you sign the bottom line with the condition that you could see an increase of 15%, along with seeing that not until 24 months later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 42 as ordinance 42, 2023, and ask Ms. Rolson to read into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, director of public service, and the finance director to issue a purchase order to Core & Main LP 26812 Echo Road, Perrysburg, Ohio, for the purchase of 2023 water distribution appurtenances and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
move for passage of ordinance 42 of 2023. It is an
Thank you.
emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mr. Olson, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 42, 2023 passes with 6 yeas and 0 nays. Final item on our agenda this evening is item 43, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Commissioner of Parks and Recreation, Tim Borton. And I will defer to Mr. Borton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is just our annual agreement. This year it happens to be with ACE to provide porta pot services, not only out here on our complex, at the schools. We put them out there for our teams that practice there during the course of the summer. At the cemeteries are all included in here. This year we did have to go to a formal bid just because of the number of tickets that we're issuing, but it is through a ticket is the exchange. So we're not actually cutting a check. It's tickets for dumping at the wastewater plant. Mr. Roman is a part of that conversation. And ACE, we had to go out to formal bid. ACE was the winner of that bid, and they've done a great job for us the last several years. So any other questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any other questions or comments?
Mr. President,
So, Mr. Reeves?
thank you. Mr. Borton, I know what the concessions, the restroom concession, how many more porta potties are we planning on having here on the facility to offset what,
Closing down.
yeah, the closing down of the old one?
Yeah, right now on this, what we sent out for, there's about 12 additional units that we've had, that will be on the baseball, softball complex that we've had in the past. Since COVID, we've had more on the complex and it's worked out well. Our customers seem to appreciate it, but with the bathrooms closing, we did order additional units.
The second part of that is, are they gonna be spread out a lot? You
Yeah,
know,
we'll
so-
have them spread around the complex, not just.
Perfect. Thank you.
In one spot.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any other questions or
Mr.
comments?
President,
Mr. Wallenzeck?
thank you, Mr. Dale. Mr. Borton, this isn't about bathrooms
boy.
or porta potties, but want you to maybe speak about the rollout of the lacrosse complex. So people in Oregon don't realize what you've done on the other side of the creek out at the recreation complex, near the soccer complex. But can you briefly let people know what's going on that other side?
Yeah, on the new side, it's 5225 Star Avenue Extension, which is just west of our current soccer fields. The new pond was put in a few years ago. Stone parking lot was put in last year. We did play actually some soccer games there in the fall on the grass area. And this year, that's going to kind of turn into our spring lacrosse area. We were supposed to paint 2 fields today, but that didn't go as according to plan with the snow. But there will be 2 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th grade lacrosse fields out there for our younger kids. Some of the porta pots in this bid are going to that complex so that there's bathroom facilities there. And our hope is to move the current umpire shed out of the construction zone where the new bathrooms are going to that pond side to kind of be a storage building and possibly a future small building to serve concessions out of. But they are serviced in here with porta pots.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. And Mr. Borton, I know that we have created a youth boys lacrosse program. Are we moving in the direction of having a youth girls lacrosse program?
We would like to do that. The boys has worked out really well because the high school varsity coach has been heavily involved in that. I mean, he does most of the finding of our coaches and coordination of practices and those kind of things. We're hoping to get that same from the girls lacrosse coach. Lacrosse, unlike some other sports, there are a lot of differences between the girls and the boys game. So it doesn't really help for the girls to learn how to play boys lacrosse as the rules are different. Some of the things you're allowed to do are different. So we would like to develop a girls program once we can get the high school coach to to help with that, assist with that.
Thank you, Mr. Borton.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck.
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake?
Mr. Borton, I got a question. I'm looking at the descriptions of some of these. Do you know if there's any that are gonna be handicap accessible?
Yeah, in all of those, sometimes it says like 5 accessible units. Those are the handicap accessible units. And then there's more, but each spot kind of lists what units we're getting, whether it's an accessible one, a standard one, et cetera. So there are several accessible ones throughout this complex and at other locations that we're servicing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any other questions or comments on item 43? Hearing none, I will assign item 43 as ordinance 43, 2023, and ask Mr. Olson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and commissioner of Parks and Recreation to enter into an agreement with Ace Diversified Services LLC, DBA Ace Sanitation, 1750 Trade Road, Holland, Ohio, for portable toilet services for the 2023 season in exchange for waste tickets to be used at the city wastewater treatment plant and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 43 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Olson, will you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 43, 2023 passes with 6 yeas and 0 nays. And this completes our agenda items for this evening. We will now move to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, I think you have the correspondence before you from Recreation, and they are for a couple of appointments, seasonal appointments. And both of these seasonal appointments will be effective as of today, March 13th through April 1st, 2024. And I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment first of John Flanagan of 5031 Seaman Road to step 3 at $17.50 an hour for facility supervisor, and Alicia Almonte, classification 1, 5052 Wynn Park at step 1, 1175, and she would be at grounds crew worker 1. And once again, I ask council's concurrence in the appointment of both of these individuals, March 13th through April 1st, 2024.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointments of facility supervisor, John Flanagan, and grounds crew worker number 1, Alicia Monte.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mr. Mayor, council does concur with the hiring of John Flanagan and Alicia Almonte.
Thank you, and that would conclude my report.
Mr. Major.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenzeck.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Mr. Davish.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Mr. Horniak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. I have a couple things here. First of all, I need to set a public hearing on Monday, March 27th at 7 p.m. For 4 agricultural renewals and 1 new agricultural district. The first one is a renewal application for an agricultural district from Karen R. Pollard et al. For 10.447 acres located at 4565 Pickle Road. The second renewal is an application for agricultural district for David C. Jolin for 17.87 acres located at 3825 Corduroy Road. The third renewal is a renewal application for agricultural district for Bolin Muschwitz et al. For 18.75 acres located at 3935 Corduroy Road. The fourth renewal application is for an agricultural district for Jeffrey J. Navarre for 55.022 acres located at 6862 Seaman Road. And the new application for an agricultural district for Jeffrey J. Navarre for 31.31 acres located at 5658 Brown Road, 12.33 acres located at 7007 Corduroy Road, and 19 acres located at 6860 Brown Road. Like I said, public hearing for March 27th at 7 PM. Also, council, we did meet today regarding that part of the dog park committee, and it's going very, very well. The only thing I do want to bring up, and the city will get this up on our city Facebook page, but March 22nd from 4 PM to 9 PM, Culver's is having a share night opportunity for the dog park, and 10% of the proceeds will benefit that park. And that completes my report. And we have some people signed in to speak. First up is Miss Lynn Gibbs. Would you approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, please?
Lynn Gibbs, 3145 Dogwood, Oregon. And why am I here? I'm here representing the Oregon Conservative Club. We are a club that's been meeting for about 8 years in Oregon. We were formerly known as the Oregon Republican Club, but we got blackballed by the local party. So we're now the Conservative Club. And we're here to give you all a gift. As Tim knows and Steve knows, we work a lot with Freedom Works in Washington. It's an activist group, and they have a new book out. So I'd like to present that to all the members of council to read in your free time and let you know. I want to read our perspective.
Thank you.
I think there's been a little bit of chatter about what we do, and I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea about what the club does and what the club stands for. We are for the following: election integrity, government transparency, indivisible responsibility and liberty. The Constitution, as it was originally written, limited government, constitutional checks and balances, fiscal restraint and integrity, which would mean less regulations, free markets, strong national defense, the Republican Party platform concerning the unborn and marriage. We support candidates who share our beliefs. And this club seeks to advance the following: education, candidate support, issue support, and legislation. And the reason I decided to come here tonight is because of the banter that's been going on about what our mission statement is. And so I want you to know it. You all have a copy of it inside your book. This is a man that we've been working with for years, this organization, along with Judicial Watch and Heritage Foundation. So if there's any questions, almost everybody here has my phone number. And I thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs, and thank you for the gift. Next, Paul Gibbs. Paul, state your name and address for the record.
My name's Paul Gibbs, 3145 Dogwood Drive, 43616. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for your service to the Oregon community and all that you do. It's a tough job, and you need a lot of courage and wisdom to do what you're doing. And I think down the road, there's going to be a lot more needed. And so what I'm going to do right now is just offer up a word of prayer for all of you in the Oregon city. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. And Father, I just ask as we continue here that you would give these council members and these government officials and our nation wisdom and direction during these difficult times. And Father, give them courage to do what is right in your eyes. We'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Caphammer. State your name and address for the record.
PJ Caphammer, 3646 Navarre Avenue. I'm actually here for, I just opened, most of you probably know, I opened a new restaurant and tavern in Oregon, and kind of want to just go over real quickly. It's this Thursday will be our official first month. It's been packed to the gills every night. It's been an adventure, and it's I've learned a lot through this whole process. What I can tell you is, though, the support from Oregon and surrounding communities has been through the roof. I think it kind of proves if you build it and you look at quality, they're excited to come. So I just wanted to go over, though, I see a lot of times where people believe the city of Oregon doesn't promote or they're against businesses. And through this process, I could understand almost where you get the mentality of that, though. With a restaurant and a bar, I was dealing with the city, the county, and the state for various different reasons, depending on licensing. Now, I'm a lifelong Oregon resident, and I've opened multiple businesses in this community. So I'm a little bit, I have an unfair advantage because I've dealt with everybody in the city for 20, 25 years. When you're applying for all these things, even though you need one to get to the other to get the other, I don't know, but if anybody's ever dealt with the state, the county, and the city, it's not always a fun thing because while you know the program, we don't. So we were going through everything, and I thought we were getting close to being ready to be open. And then the county said, well, you can't get the food permit. You're not okay with Oregon. And I'm like, well, what do you mean I'm not okay with Oregon? I'm not doing anything with Oregon. We're just painting and doing some stuff. So long story short, we get back, and there's previous violations from the renters from before, not me, that they weren't okay. So thank God I knew Jim Gilmore's phone number and knew how to reach Mr. Gilmore, and they were great. And Mark was great too. You know, you just don't know these things. So moving forward, I think there's a niche. And I talked to Mr. Wallensack about this, and he's opened a business. So you don't know these things, but there's a niche for one person maybe in the city who coordinates with the chief or the assistant chief at fire, that coordinates with zoning. So, once again, thank God I have these numbers, and I've dealt with them for 25 years, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But if you can make that call to that person, it would simplify the process so that each party knows what's going on with the others. And I've had a lot of times in business and stuff, they're like, well, I'm having a problem with this, or I'm having a problem with that. I'm like, well, just call this person. Only because through the last 20 years, I knew who to reach out to. So maybe down the road, and even Oregon Economic Development, if you had somebody appoint that was coordinating all these parties, I just think it streamlines the process. I was amazed. I'm like, what do you mean I'm not okay? And I'm like, well, there was things with extension cords. I'm like, I didn't put it had nothing to do with me. So, but the building, and you learn this real quickly, you didn't do it, but the previous person did it, and it wasn't good then. So it caught me off by surprise, and I was probably there for maybe 6-7 months, painting and doing cleanup and doing all the stuff we're doing. And I'm like, well, I got to be close. And then I'm like, whoa. So thank God, Jim Gilmore, he was great. And they got people down there, and they walked me through it. And the other thing is, the businesses sometimes fear dealing with the city. I could see where that would be a problem. I'm comfortable with telling Jim how I feel, and he's comfortable telling me where I stand either way. Sometimes we agree to disagree, but I'm comfortable with that. That's going that way. But if you had that point person who's kind of in between before it gets going, so they can say, look, here's Jim, and Jim, you can call Jim here, or you can call this person in zoning and the fire department. It went really quickly, thank God. They were really great to work with once I reached out to them. It was just a good process. And truthfully, the county was a great process too, and And the state was a great process. But I wasn't gonna be able to be approved by the state because the county wasn't gonna approve me because of Oregon, and Oregon wasn't gonna approve me, not for anything I did, because the previous tenant was cited and they were gonna have to close anyways. I didn't know that. And it was simple, like extension cords and other things. But it just maybe down the road, coordinate, have somebody who can reach out to these new businesses and say, here, we're here to help. No reason to fear us. I mean, you're gonna have to follow zoning. I mean, that's a given, and a lot of people are afraid of that, but zoning's there for a reason. And so I would just want to bring that forward. It's been a great thing. I'm exhausted and tired, and but we're at standing room only every night. I mean, we had people, they said the first week it'd be a zoo because people, you're new, and the second week it'd start slowing down. Well, it got bigger and busier. The third week's been even busier. And we have them parking for an hour and a half at Myers in their cars waiting for us to call them in. So it hasn't slowed down. It's only gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and the community's just been great. But I was thinking about that, while I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I can understand why, if you're just coming in and you don't understand the process and you don't know the city and the people here and economic development, there's a lot of great things here and a lot of, and when you coordinate work, it's a seamless process. It's just really well, and they've proven that. But once again, I had known everybody there for like 20, 25 years, so I had an advantage. So I just wanted to point that out. It's been a great turnout. Hopefully, if anybody hasn't been there, I think I've seen most faces in there, but come get a cheeseburger and see what you think. But I just wanted to add that because I know there's a lot of things in the works here and everything, but if you had that person, that point, that was looking, they could even pull up the zoning on the previous and say, look, you might not know this, but the other person was cited and they didn't do anything to fix it. So thank you, and come on out and get a burger and beer if you guys want to.
Thank you, Mr. Caphammer. That's an interesting idea. It is.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Mr. Zale?
Yeah.
Or Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Wellens.
Thank you, Mr. President. In my conversation with Mr. Caphammer, we expressed to each other the desire to try to streamline some of the communications for a new business owner and what they have to go through. And, we were going to wait till Mr. Caphammer's restaurant was up and running. I'm going to try to get together with him. And I've had the same conversation with additional new business owners in the community that have struggled the same way as Mr. Caphammer did, so that we can try to streamline and improve that communication process with the business owners that want to come into our community. So again, Mr. Caphammer, if you would like to be part of that group that gets together and try to formulate an idea, we'll get with Mr. Gilmore and figure out a path moving forward. So people just like Mr. Caphammer and myself, I went through the same thing with the zoning. You don't know unless you do it. And I've had the same struggles with my businesses. So I think a streamlined process for new business owners would be appropriate for the community.
I guess my question would be, thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. I guess my question would be, is this something that we would, I don't know if I'd call it train or use somebody from zoning or through economic development? I think about the frequency that we would need this, not more than I think, I know. But we certainly wouldn't put somebody in the
It wouldn't be
payroll
it wouldn't be a
specifically for this.
full-time
Right,
position, I don't
right.
think, but we got to I would like to sit down with some people that went through the same process and same issues to see their ideas on how we could navigate moving forward to improve the process. I'm not going to sit here and think that the people sitting behind this dais have all the answers. I want to hear from the other people. Alec, if
Mr.
I'm sure
Thompson.
you would be able to have
I was gonna
great
say,
ideas
Mr. Zale, If I
also.
may,
Mr. Thompson, go ahead.
Mr. Caphammer, I think that's a great point, and obviously you have the connections, as you stated, at the city, but numerous times throughout the past 11 months I've been here in this position, I do get those calls, and again, to your point, I think some people know how to utilize that, the chamber and the economic development direction, to point you in the right direction, help you out with those connections, but definitely a valid point that maybe we could, for new business owners looking to come into the community, here's the economic development phone line, please utilize it. That's what we're here for. So again, you don't have to be a member of the foundation to utilize us. So we want to promote economic growth and business in Oregon, and I think we do a pretty good job of that. So, if you have anybody else that would you know that would like to reach out, please do. And I offer that to anybody.
I mean, I think initially, at least, maybe we could develop a checklist that these people could follow.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
right. And to your point, county and state connections, we have those as well. So definitely like to be a liaison for any business we can help in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
if I may, having owned a couple businesses here and in other cities and other states, and having recently just gone through and starting an LLC, which I hadn't started a new business in 20 years. If you talk to any entrepreneur about the most daunting thing about opening their business, they will tell you it is the paperwork jam. State taxes, licensing, payroll taxes, permits from the city, the county, the state, depending on the type of business. And you can't get this until you have this. And until you have this, you have to go get this. And I do believe that it's still in operation. Toledo, through the Chamber of Commerce and a partnership there, operates SCORE, which is, retired executives from area companies that have donated their time to help direct businesses. A lot of SCORE is, I'll say, more strategic and management oversight type of viewpoint. To the concept of this, I'm sure we have people that would be willing to serve and do that. The checklist is a great point, because a lot of people have a great idea. They have the energy and the desire to create a business and develop a business. They just don't know how to get it off the ground and how to start it, because it is a daunting task. And to your point, if you know the people, it's still a daunting task. So anything we can do, I'd certainly like to be part of that conversation as well, because I think that could be a great benefit. And when you talk about things that make a city inviting to do business in, simply trying to create a roadmap that says, okay, here's the things you need to think about within each service or business sector. Here are the things you would need to have to operate. Something just that simple, and the where you go to for that could be, absolutely helpful to everybody. And we know, the startup business since COVID has just absolutely blossomed. So people are doing all kinds of things as sole proprietorships and LLCs and things like that, and finding a way to be able to support that and help that. It might be worth reaching out to Toledo through SCORE and finding out what they have, and if there's something we could mimic and model. And if not, I would be willing to bet many communities around here would be very interested in lending resources, or at least being a part of the discussion to create such a thing. Because like I said, the energy is there, but it is tough to figure out what you need to do to start a business in any community. So it could be a great opportunity for us to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mr. Capham.
And we really don't have to overthink this.
Mhm.
If we had even a phone number on your website for new business owners or something like, the problem with the economic development and the chamber, I've opened like 6 businesses. Usually that's after you're open, they come in and meet. I mean, when you're rebuilding and you're doing stuff like that, and a lot of times you're not making that connection. But if we had a phone number, so that a point person, and anybody from here, you wouldn't have to create a position.
Correct.
But once you get that contact, you can just have the checklist like you said. And here's the numbers, if you have any questions, here's where you might, call not only us, but call the county, maybe you need to deal with this. It was amazing to me, like I'm calling the county and she's like, well, I hope you got rid of that stove and oven. I'm like, whoa. I don't even have that. I just bought all brand new. And she, well, but they already know. So, I mean, she's literally like, what stove and oven are you talking about? She goes, the one that we ticketed and they're not allowed to use because it was ready to catch fire. So it was just like things like that. But if you just even had the contact number for a point person, I'm not saying create a position. And Alec and them guys do a great job and everything, but a lot of times that's after the process is well past beginning. And if at some point, everyone has to call you guys to figure out if they're okay. And if you just had that thing. So, but I'd love to sit down with Mr. Wallenzak and the rest and just kind of make it a little easier if you've never done it before.
Yeah.
It's very nerve wracking. So thanks and have
Thank
a
you,
great
Mr.
night. I got to get back. My ice machine ain't working.
Just a minute. I got one other question. In all those hundreds of hours that you spent getting ready, was there anybody there almost as much as you?
Yeah, there's some
Yeah. But
Thank
no,
you.
I just want to say this and BJ is a dear friend of mine and I tried to help as much as I possibly could. What an eye-opening experience. And I will tell you this, if you're thinking about opening a restaurant, you have to be crazy.
And he's there as much as me, and he didn't know any of it, and I didn't know any of it. So I'm like, what's going on? And of course, I'm gonna reach out to Jim and everything. But the funny part is thinking that you're friends with the mayor would make it easier. It made it 0% easier and a lot of times more difficult. Cause he's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, well, a lot of good you're doing, you know, quit painting things, which he's horrible at doing anyways. But like I said, I'm in there working right alongside him and it didn't help any. So that's the process.
But it is.
Thanks. I gotta go fix that.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you, Mr. Mayor. One last person signed in to speak, Ms. Ackerman, please come to the podium and state your name and address, please, for the record.
Beth Ackerman, 931 Bury Road. I know there was some question about where wetlands actually are in the city of Oregon. So, and what the source was that I was referring to. And so I just wanted to clarify that it's the National Wetlands Inventory and it's created through ArcGIS, which is the same thing you use for your mapping, and it is updated twice a year. And I have a map, since it's a night for gifts, I guess. But I'll leave them up here, but some copies of where the very few forest shrub wetlands that we have in Oregon exist. And I would just ask you please to consider going forward that we help to preserve them and not to degrade them, I'm sorry, in any way. And I was curious if you had a conversation about security cameras yet in here?
We had an internal, Mr. President, if I may. If I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Major.
We had an internal discussion, the police chief and I, and it's a matter of security, so we feel that the matter has been resolved.
So you're putting them in?
It's a matter of security, so we consider the matter resolved. It is, it's a matter of
yes.
security, so we have to keep it secure.
Okay. Thank you.
In other words, security is an item that can be actually discussed in executive session if we were allowed to go into
Oh, no,
executive
no, I
session, if you know what I
understand
mean.
that.
So what I'm insinuating is that it's a matter of security, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay, and please consider the parking lot out front too. Thank you.
Glenn Ryan, please come to the podium and state your name, please, and address.
Glenn Ryan, 2707 Pickle Road. Oh, thank you. That's, anyway, I was going to keep my big fat mouth shut tonight, but after hearing what happened with the gentleman just a few minutes ago, I wanted to tell you something that I was cooking up. Next week on Friday from 12 to 1:30 at the Oregon Public Library, we're going to hold a kind of like a little town hall session to talk just about business education. One of the things I noticed that coming back from St. Petersburg is that there is a distinct lack of small businesses in the community, not only in here, but in Toledo as well. And so I started looking, coming from St. Petersburg, we had a thing called the Greenhouse, which was a small business incubator. And if you go onto their website, and I'll send a link to you all so you can take a look at it, but they have their month of March, they have free business classes of all shapes and sizes all week. And I noticed when I started looking here, and I actually talked to Alex, oh, he's not here anymore, but I talked to Alex about it. And the University of Toledo's Business Center has one class for the whole month of March. You can go on their website and you can actually get into YouTube videos and stuff like that, but it's not the same as actually being sat into a class and talking to a business person that knows the stuff. So one of my goals was to develop something. The thing I noticed when I was leaving here was the fact that there was a lot of people talking. There was a lot of businesses changing hands. And my question for this, one of my goals for this was to, why are they changing hands? What is a business education? What's to stop it? And so anyway, it's more of a fact-finding thing. And it'll be from 12 to 1:30 at the Oregon Branch Library. And just to let you know what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Thank you. And council, this concludes anybody signed up to speak. I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Davish. Council, or is there any objections? Hearing no objections, this meeting is adjourned.